You are now tuned in to higher frequencies. We do this frequently. Turn your radio station to E3 for that decency. Listen to great music and the latest movement. Safe listening for anyone that's tuned in. Who you waking up to? Anna Deshawn, Q Crew and friends. It's that real talk. Online radio with the spins. You caught up in traffic, frustrated. Just check in with E3 to shift your vibrations and get elevated. That's queer radio done right. Choose to be yourself. That's the only way to live life, and that's how it's done here. Just know y'all tuned in to the greatest. Ain't no competition. We ain't worried about the other stations. Check.
What's good people? You know, this is your girl, Anna Deshawn, right here with Wake Up with Anna and Friends, only on E3 Radio, your number one stop for queer radio done right. And today we got one of my best friends. Okay, we Drake University, all the things right here with Tracy Baim. I am almost certain and probably, I'm 100% certain. E3 Radio would not even be a possibility without the brainchild and the passion and the love that Tracy has put into independent media here in Chicago. So Tracy Baim, what's going on? Welcome to the show.
Oh, that's the best intro I've ever had. So thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here.
Yeah, I mean it truly from the bottom of my heart. Y'all, when I found out Tracy went to Drake University too, I was like, yes, I did make the right decision.
My decision was that it was 7 hours and my parents wouldn't make that drive every weekend. It had to be far enough away that they wouldn't come visit all the time.
That's real. I'm sure my parents, they came to visit enough. Okay, so the 7 hours was, it was a walk in the park.
Oh my God, they dropped me off and then they came to my graduation. That's it. Not once in 4 years.
Not once.
Not once.
No, what my freshman year, I remember I was getting an award. It's not neither here nor there. And my parents actually surprised me. I had no idea they even knew about it. I didn't even tell them about it. I was like, it's okay. And they showed up and surprised me. It was great.
Oh, that's sweet.
They're the best. But we ain't here to talk about my parents. We're here to talk about Tracy and all the amazing work that she's been doing because she's a friend of the social. You're going to see Tracy back, you know what I'm saying, in a couple months. That's the beautiful thing about this. But what's coming up? And E3 Radio is proud to be a part of SEMA. And maybe I should start there. Tracy, can you tell the good people what SEMA is before I get into Fundraiser?
Yeah. It's the Chiago Indepdend Media Alliance. And we started this a couple years ago as a project of the Chicago Reader. A young journalist named Yasmin Dominguez is the coordinator of it. And 68 community media outlets. Then it ranges in size from very small new startups to longtime legacy publications like the Hyde Park Herald. They're members in a loose sense in that we come together for various projects. And one of those coming up, 43 of our members are participating in. It's our annual fundraiser. It's a joint fundraiser where we try to lift all boats so that an outlet like Block Club promotes it to their members to support them through this. And maybe then they'll see, oh, I want to support E3 Radio or Windy City Times or something else. Or what we learned last year is that 2/3 of the people that came into that fundraiser supported all people equally, all outlets. They would give $100 and say, just divide it among all 43. So it launches on May 12th. SaveChicagoMedia.org will be the website. It'll be a 1-month campaign. We're trying to raise some matching dollars from foundations. So far we have about 7,000, but we hope to get up to 30,000 in matching donations. And then each individual outlet promotes it. It does two things. It raises money that we all need, but it also raises visibility for all the outlets among each other's audiences. Last year, that was another great thing is that people said, oh, I didn't even know there were that many. Well, you know what? There's even more than that. But this is the tip of the iceberg. Support these outlets and learn about the work they do. And last year it was mission critical because of the impact of COVID. And then the social justice because of George Floyd's murder. So those outlets were even more important in giving messages to the communities they serve.
100%. And when everything was disenfranchised, media got hit so hard last year, and people are still feeling the impacts today because independent media especially depends on small businesses, advertising with them. And so it's a trickle down effect, and it hits media because you still expect the media every day. You still expect the news, you expect that newspaper on your doorstep, but it costs money to put that newspaper on your doorstep or that news PDF in your inbox or the time it takes to report, and the investment into independent media, you know, without advertisers is tough. And the work that SEMA did last year was groundbreaking. I pulled it together so quickly. I was like, this can only be something Tracy put her hands on. I mean, it was amazing how much money was raised last year in such a quick turnaround. And Yasmin has been so wonderful. So family, if y'all don't know about CIMA, CIMA, just Google CIMA, Chicago Independent Media Alliance. You're going to find so many outlets who are doing such wonderful work for their communities. And they deserve our support.
Yep, absolutely.
They deserve our support. And Tracy, I follow you on Facebook, just like, the other thousands of people in Chicago. And you've been so cool about posting all these historical pictures. Where are you finding all this stuff?
So about 3 years ago or so, I gave the Chicago Public Library about 200 boxes of photos and press releases and a bunch of archival stuff.
200 boxes?
200 boxes. And we had already scanned all of that stuff. And that was kind of hard copy photos from our archives. But I had held back a few boxes of negatives because I knew that this was a series of negatives that had never been, like when we used to make a contact sheet of the negatives, we might only make a print of 2 or 3 of those and use those in the paper. The rest of those negatives, nobody would have ever seen except the photographer and maybe me and the developer. So I knew that those maybe had something that we should figure out how to digitize those before we gave them to the library. So when I moved recently, after 43 years in the same location, I found these 4 boxes of negatives. And I started going through them, and I found this program on an iPhone called Filmbox, where it allowed me to take a low resolution photo of a negative. Because otherwise it would have been like I would have had to send these out, and it would have been thousands of dollars to make prints. I didn't want to make prints unless they were good. So I started seeing like, oh my God, the Names Project AIDS Quilt, or the March on Washington, or Literary Exchange, or Chicago Black Lesbians and Gays, or the Bud Billiken Parade, act up. And I was like, holy cow. So I said, I'm going to start posting these. And then luckily a friend of mine's partner is really, she's a professional photographer, but also works at Photoshop. She offered to then take these negatives and do high resolution scans for me. It's going to take a long time, but that way they're at least usable in other forms, because we get contacted by authors and documentary makers all the time, including for the Art and Peppy film. Like they want archival stuff, and the way I'm scanning them is not good enough. It's good for Facebook, but it's not good for book. So so I'm hoping that they get high resolution scan, but it's both I'm really enjoying it, but at the same time it's also really hard, because I remember taking those photos, and I remember running those photos from other photographers of all these people who've passed away, all these organizations that did flamed out but did incredible work during their peak time. It's sad and motivating. It's a weird mix of emotions. And at the same time, it's because we closed down Windy City Times as a print issue last fall. We've decided first project that we're doing is a book of covers. So Kirk Williamson, art director at Windy City Times, pulled together more than 470 covers, mostly of Windy City Times and outlines, but also black lines on Levita and night spots. And that book is only going to be available for a limited run. You can get it at windycitytimes.com, and there's a donate button, and it'll be the books are available there. It's a 4-color, 370-page book it's just historical in and out. These photos we hope to eventually do in another project too, but for sure online in some form. It's a way to connect the dots of history, meaning the things that were happening back then are still happening. The racism that existed in the gay community back then still exists, the sexism, and the issues that we face, homelessness and HIV/AIDS and all these other issues that impact our community, people are still fighting today. And it's not that I want people to be frustrated by the timeline that we've been fighting, for decades. Rather, I want them to be inspired that you're not the first of something. You're the legacy. Of your ancestors that did this work, and many of them gone. So I want to start telling the stories of some of those people. ChicagoGayHistory.org website that I did in 2008 does have a lot of oral histories, but there's so many more stories to tell.
And let me tell you, I use that site all the time for my own research. It is amazing what you've done and how you're curating a history of LGBTQ folks in Chicago and around the country. And I can only imagine what else is on those negatives. I mean, I'm so glad somebody at Photoshop is like making high-res images for people to use in the future. Because one of the biggest things, and as a Black woman, I'm very aware of, is that we have to tell our own stories and we have to share our history. Otherwise, it'll be erased and washed away as if it never existed. And there was so much good work done that you covered. And as you post things, especially the Black lesbians of the time, and I'm looking like, wait, is that Miss Donna? Wait, is that Miss Pat? And all these amazing people who have been so supportive of me and my work and Affinity. And it's just like, I didn't know them then. I didn't know myself when some of these pictures were taken. And it is just, the work you do is just amazing. And I'm so glad there's a book of covers. We're going to definitely get a book here just because it deserves to be seen and celebrated.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting about history is I remember when my nephew was in Chicago Public Schools and they were teaching about Black history, right? It was always like Martin Luther King and maybe one other person.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how the gay movement's history will be told. It will be, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 people that get to represent a whole movement. And we know they're likely going to be white people. We'll be lucky if a Baird Rustin, James Baldwin and Audre Lorde get in there. But there were tens of thousands of other people doing this work. And I always felt like, I think I was fortunate and unfortunate when I started in gay media in 1984. Because of HIV/AIDS, because of serial killers, because of violence and suicide and all of that, I knew that journalism, I always had been taught, was the first draft of history. But I also knew that it was critically important for that first draft to be comprehensive, that it couldn't just be the typical stories that get covered in a mainstream or even other gay media, which is about what the white gay male community was doing or the wealthy gay male community was doing, that we had to make sure that we were taking photos and documenting. Kate Sosen, who was a journalist for us for a few years and now works at the 19th, wrote an essay in our last issue of print issue last fall, saying that I always wondered why Tracy wanted me to make sure I got all the names of all the honorees and the folks at events and take photos of all the people or group shots and things like that. And now I realize why. It was to make sure they were remembered. And if you don't go beyond that first person who tends to be the one with the most power and privilege, you won't see the rest. So I always made sure from day one that we were covering the wide range of the community. And the reason that Blackline started in the mid-90s was because there was a publication called Thing by Robert Ford. And when he died from HIV/AIDS, I brought the community together because I thought it was going to be a huge gap not to have Thing anymore. It was a zine that was, infrequent, but it was impactful. And so we had this big meeting at the Generator, and I said to the community, look, I will support if the community wants to come up with doing a publication, but if you want outlines at the time to do this, we will resource it, and it can be run by and for the African American community. And the vote was, unanimous to have Outlines newspaper run it, and then people were paid from the African American community to produce it. And then the Latino community came together and said, we want this. And so we did Unlimited. Both of those lasted less than a decade because it was, not cheap to do and no ads. But they were extremely rewarding. And people were like, why are you doing separate publication? I'm like, well, we cover that community in Outlines. That's no doubt. But if there's a perception that it's better to have it separate because there's more space, more dedication by and for communities, how do we say no to that? Because that's the reason we have gay papers, right? You say, well, look for it in the Tribune and sometimes. No, sometimes we do better for ourselves when we do it ourselves. So that was an honor to be done. We had the big 1-year anniversary celebration at the DuSable Museum. It was fantastic. Wow. And seeing all those images and photos validates what we were doing. Because if we were a traditional gay newspaper, it'd be all, gay parties and gay galas and, not the depth and breadth of this community, which is incredible, right? It's been an incredible position to be in, to have witnessed all of that since 1984. I feel very lucky, and now I want to make sure I pass that along before I can't remember it anymore or I'm not here anymore, right? Like there are many legacy people who are gone, and their memories and stories are gone with them.
Yeah. And I'm just grateful you've always had that mindset. How can I create something that's going to last longer than me? And you have always had that. I admire that. I aspire to do that and do the same thing because it is so incredibly important for especially for young queer folks to know that all of these folks who came before you, who are making it even more possible for you to come out when you're 12, 13, 14 years old and you feel like you brand new, okay, where rainbows just can't stop flying, okay? That there was generations of people who were flying rainbows when no one wanted to see a rainbow, and were proud when nobody wanted them to be proud. And it's just so important to continue to tell those stories. And man, Chicago's a lucky place, okay?
Yeah, I really admire what you're doing and the chutzpah it took for you to take the leap off the cliff and do this full time. It's fantastic. We're going to be, as a city, we're going to be much better because you're doing these stories. So I really appreciate being on your show.
Trace, I just want to grow up and be like you. Okay, I don't know if I can keep up, but it's just
I'm slowing down.
Goals. Okay, family. Tracy Baim is here. I don't know. That's all that needs to be said. Okay, it's a great show. Stay close. You're tuned in to Wake Up with Anna and Friends.
Thanks very much.